Hi, my name is Fred McNeil, and welcome to QACTV 7. We have a weekly show where we interview veterans who either born and raised in Queen Anne's County, currently living in Queen Anne's County. The last census shows us there are about 3,353 veterans. So, hey, Brent, I've got a lot of shows to do yet. I got it made. And we have a good time. We call this show, Thank You for Your Service. Now, I have one of my favorite characters, Brent Lewis. Brent, thank you.
Thank
now,
you.
A lot of you know this about Brent. You know he's a published and well-read author. His book on the Eastern Shore in Hollywood, we'll dabble with that if we have some time, fantastic. He does appraising. He also, not known, Jody Schultz, who played in the NFL. Rumor is Brent taught him how to play football. you can, okay.
That, yeah, right.
But what you don't know, I bet, Brent is a veteran. A Navy veteran. First of all, thank you for your service right
Thanks,
off the
man.
bat.
I appreciate it.
Now, Brent, let's start from the beginning. Born and raised in Queen Anne's County.
Absolutely. Well, born in Chestertown, but raised in
the shore,
Queen Anne's,
the
yeah.
shore. Schools in Queen Anne's?
Absolutely.
Elementary, Ken Island Elementary?
Graysonville.
Oh, Graysonville.
Grew up in Graysonville. Class of 80, Queen Anne's County High School, Lions.
Now, we've been talking. Mrs. Romanofsky, Mrs. Dean at that time was one of your favorites. Mr. Fowler, they were class advisors.
Mr. Fowler was great.
Now, were you, like me, a nerd in high school, or were you an athlete, a theater guy?
No, I actually, I was a pretty good student until high school, and then went off the rails. Yes. That's kind of how I ended up in the service.
Okay.
A lot of us in my graduating class, the Iranian hostages took place in November of '79. I was class of 80, so there was a real surge of patriotism at the time.
A lot of people joining the service.
And those of us who weren't college bound, a lot of my friends joined the service. I actually joined in March of 1980 while I was still in high school. I joined a late entry.
Okay.
So that counted toward my service time. And I graduated in June, and in July I was in boot camp in Great Lakes.
But before we go to service, high school was a good experience. I mean, you enjoyed it?
Oh, yeah. I was, junior year class president, class clown, again, a good student until high school, but I had good relationships with my teachers.
Okay, so you enjoyed it. You had a good time.
I enjoyed high school.
And in those days, a lot of people don't. There was only one high school in Queen Anne's County.
Yeah, that's correct.
So you're coming from the tip of Ken Island, from Sothersville. You're all mixed together. I think the county was better for it. What do you think?
There's a possibility of that. I like the rivalry between Ken Island and Queen Anne's. That's something we didn't have.
It makes it kind of fun.
Yeah, we didn't really have a rivalry with. Now, I'm sure the athletes that I went to school with had specific rivalries: baseball, this high school,
Kent
football,
County,
that high
Eastern,
school.
something.
But the Ken Island Queen Anne's rivalry is kind of neat.
Okay, so it's like everything. Change is good.
Change is inevitable.
So let's go back to, so you're in high school. All of a sudden we have some foreign affairs things driving us all crazy. So you did you sign up for a particular MOS, or how did you pick the Navy or the Army, Marines?
So, the recruiters were out.
Giving you pencils.
Yeah. My house on the island, I lived with a single mother, and my house was kind of the house where all the kids hung out. Okay. So once the recruiters saw that there were always 6 or 8 guys hanging around my house, they were there all the time.
Bingo.
Most of my buddies, well, not most, but half and half, I guess there were a couple Marines, but mostly Army and Navy.
How many guys would you say went in and out of that group?
I don't know, maybe half a dozen of us, or more or less. The Navy appealed to me. I wanted to go in as a journalist.
Oh, so that's where the writing bug started.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do, but they said, well, there's a year-long wait for journalism.
The recruiters always say that.
Yeah, and I said, well, if I wait a year, I'm not going.
Good for you.
And they said, well, how about being a cook? I was like, well, I don't know how to cook. And they said, well, that's a good reason to be one.
Writer, cook. Wait a minute, only the military can do that.
Well, what they told me was that there would be a $10,000 re-signing bonus.
Oh, if you re-enlist.
And I thought, oh, well, I'm going to re-enlist.
That was big bucks then.
Right.
Yes.
And they also told me that I could change my rate once I was in, that it would be easier to get into the journalism program
Once
I was already there.
And that sounds like a recruiter's.
They got me. Yeah.
So you went in as a cook?
I did. I went in as a cook.
Oh, right.
And prior to that, as a high school kid, I knew
Did
not
you ever
how to
boil
cook
an egg?
anything. I had to call my cousin over to make me a grilled cheese.
Okay.
But I also kind of thought, well, that's something that everybody should know how to do.
Not a
like if
bad
you're going
thing.
to take care of yourself, you should know how to make yourself
now,
a
let
meal.
me just check. Was it a 4-year enlistment or 2 or what?
I did 3 years active duty, 2 years active reserve at Fort McHenry in Norfolk, 2 weeks in the summer, and then 1 year in active. So my 6 years was spent 3 years active duty, 2 years active reserve, 1 year inactive.
Well, let's go. Okay, let's go back. So, where was basic training for you?
Great Lakes, Illinois.
How about
My first airplane, my first time I flew on an airplane was going to boot camp.
Okay.
People still smoked on the airplanes. Did my, whatever it was, 13 weeks, I think, boot camp was at that point. And then went to San Diego.
Let me stay in boot camp.
Yep.
Is it true? Now, remember, I'm Army. Basically, in Army and boot camp, raise your right hand. Oh, you got it. You're all right. You're a soldier now. Navy, they told me you had to learn how to tie knots. You had to do all. Is it? You tell me.
There was a lot of. So each company, when you're in boot camp, would get a company flag, and then you would compete for flags for marching and testing. And my company commander, we were his first group. We graduated from boot camp with no flags other than our company flag.
He wasn't happy.
So we were standing among, companies that had 6, 8, 10, 12 flags, and all we had was our company flag. So it was kind of like stripes. It kind of was that Bill Murray situation.
Now, again, I know nothing. Army drill instructor, DIs, and Marine have this reputation. Navy, do you have a DI? Who runs it?
Yeah, the company commander was pretty much in charge. You would go to different
classes
and challenges, and there would be someone there who would kind of take over for the company commander. Okay. But yeah, our ineptitude totally belonged to us.
Now, I'm assuming like the Army, enlisted men were in the barracks. I mean, in other words, there was a sergeant.
Yeah, he was like a first-class petty officer.
Okay.
Our commander was
He stayed in the back.
More or less.
Okay. Now, in the Army, again, I'm staying with the basic, we had to qualify with a weapon. Navy too or not?
I think we had one afternoon of weapon training.
Oh, good for you.
We had to go through a smokehouse, fire, that kind of training for shipboard life. A lot of the training seemed to be geared towards ship life.
Did you find it difficult? Not so difficult? Hey,
it was okay. I was. I had my bad moments and good moments, like everybody. And then because we were so inept, guys kept falling out. And then other guys who were, a restraint on their units would end up in ours.
F troop.
We were kind of all the rejects.
Okay, so you make it through basic, and you didn't have any flags.
We didn't have any flags.
But you could tie some knots.
Well, we could tie some knots.
Where'd you go from basic?
Went to San Diego, went to mess specialist school in San Diego.
So that's the cook school.
Cook school.
Now, obviously, so tell me, are you cooking all day?
Well, one thing I've kind of found in since then is like talking to my cousin Mark Horney, who's also from Queen Anne's. He went in the Army, and cooks are looked at very differently, I think, in the Army versus the Navy.
Well, we knew in the Army, if cook was mad at you, you get the small piece of meat, the small the MPs and cooks, don't mess with them. How about the Navy?
Mark was always disappointed. Like, he was like, oh, man, I can't believe you went in as a cook. And to me, though, on shipboard life, cooks are very, like, everybody wants to know the cook.
Yes.
So on board the ship, once I got to Nimitz, which we'll talk about, but, cooks carried a lot of clout.
Yes.
Knocks on the door. Hey, could we trade something for this? So there was a lot of that.
You could sneak in the back door and be given a sandwich or something.
And we can talk about that when we get to Nimitz. But I spent one Mediterranean cruise in the.
Well, let me do that. Let's stay at your cooking school.
Yeah, let's do that.
How long was cooking school?
I forget. I think that was 6 or 8 weeks, something like that. I was in San Diego.
What always amazed me, you weren't cooking for 2 or 3.
No.
You weren't cooking. You're talking about 200 or 300. Was that a trick you had to learn? Or
Well, but when you get to Nimitz, when we were out to sea, we had 6,000 people on board. So when you get out, it's very hard to break those recipes down to 2 or 4 people.
Yeah. Well, okay. So you get through cook school, no problems.
Yeah, no problems. I flirted with the idea of going subs while I was in San Diego.
Thank goodness you didn't do that.
Yeah, decided not to. And
how brave are those men and women to go in a tin can 6 months? Or
yeah,
whatever.
I quickly rethought that.
Good for you. Good.
And there were like 4 of us who flirted with the idea of subs, and there was a sub commander there who told us that he could pretty much get us any place we wanted to go.
Really?
But all 4 of us backed out, and all 4 of us ended up on Nimitz. So I kind of felt like maybe we were being punished for
so now you're in San Diego.
And then I came home for 2 weeks.
But wait a minute, San Diego, not a bad spot to be,
It wasn't
right?
great then.
Oh, wasn't?
Yeah, San Diego was in a
Really?
it was in a down.
Good weather, but everything else kind of.
Yeah, like off base was sketchy. Like you couldn't. There were places that we couldn't
Just didn't go. Okay.
So.
But anyway, you get through school, no problem.
Through school, come home for 2 weeks.
And then where they send you then?
And then go to Norfolk. So that's.
Is that the Atlantic Fleet headquarters or something? Yes.
And that's November of '80.
Okay.
So, graduate high school in June, boot camp all summer long, San Diego, come home for 2 weeks, and then right around December of 1980, I go to Norfolk, but the ship is in Portsmouth.
Now, what ship were you?
USS Nimitz.
Oh, so you went big time right
aircraft
away.
carrier. It was the biggest.
Tell people about
So the Nimitz was the biggest warship in the world.
Right.
It's now the oldest active area.
It's still in service.
It is. It's scheduled to be decommissioned next year, out of service next year, and then decommissioned by 2027.
Mothballed somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. In 2017, the USS Gerald Ford became
the biggest.
And it was the biggest ever. Okay. But at the time, Nimitz was the biggest. It's nuclear reactors, 2, so it has a intended 50-year lifespan. It only need refueling every 25 years because it's nuclear.
That's not bad.
No, it's about 1,000 feet at the waterline, 1,000 feet long.
We're talking about a big ship.
Big ship, about a 4-acre.
Landing.
Yeah, the top deck is about 4 acres. Goes about 30 knots. And
this is a city on the water on a huge vessel, correct?
Yeah, like anything that you have in a small city, you would have on board that ship.
So you're assigned it. It's out. So what did you do? How long?
It's funny, again, go back to the Iranian hostage crisis. Nimitz was out. So it was christened in 1972. Went to Norfolk in '75. Went out on its first cruise in '76. And it was out to sea already when the hostage crisis happened.
Okay.
They had been there since September of '79 out to sea. The hostage crisis happens in November. Those guys ended up on an 8.5-month deployment.
What's a normal deployment?
Like 6 months.
Okay.
And most of their time was at sea. I think at the time they had the record for a United States ship actually being at sea.
So they're out there.
They're out there. That's kind of like when I'm at boot camp, but when I get to Norfolk, they're in Portsmouth, which is a shipyard.
Okay.
They've come in from Gonzo Station, and the failed attempt to rescue the hostages was off Nimitz. And so those guys,
helicopters took off.
Yeah, off of our ship.
Sands and good luck.
Yeah. And so those guys had spent 8.5 months at sea, 120 days maybe at sea without a break, had launched a failed recovery mission.
Just bad luck, all bad luck.
Yeah, it seemed like, and then it was funny, in August of 1980, while I was still in boot camp, a movie came out called Final Countdown, starring Kirk Douglas as the captain of the Nimitz.
Really?
And the Nimitz goes back in time to Pearl Harbor.
Oh, wow.
And so when I get out and we get assigned to Nimitz, all the smart guys in our classes were like, "Hey, isn't that the ship that Kirk Douglas is the captain of?" And it wasn't, but that was hanging over our hanging over our head.
Yeah.
But yeah, Nimitz seemed like, particularly the first couple years that I was there, it seemed like every time we went out to sea, something would happen.
Now, is that considered good duty for an enlisted guy?
You know, it has its benefits and its negatives.
Okay.
You're out to sea typically longer than a destroyer or a cruiser would be.
Right.
But you're also kind of, you know, you're on the admiral's ship. And
this is the cream of the cream of what the Navy has, right?
So with everything, there's positives and negatives. You know, like because it was nuclear powered, we couldn't tie up at most places that we would have Liberty. So we'd have to take Liberty boats back and forth, launch Liberty. So
well, let me go. When you get there, are you an E1 when you get there?
Yep. No, yeah, E1 when I get there,
So
E4 when I leave.
What's life like as an E1 cook on this? Were you a pot and pan guy?
Oh, well, that's funny. I get to the main galley, and most boot camps, as you would call E1, getting to a ship, would be assigned the dirty jobs,
cleaning up and stuff like that.
Grills, fryers, all that. But there was a E3 who was working the steam kettles, which made sauces and gravies and was a pretty clean gig in the kitchen.
Right.
There were maybe 8 of us recruits, boot camp standing there, and they told him to pick one. He picked me and later told me it was like looking at a litter of puppies and picking the least dumb-looking one.
You won.
So yeah, I got a real good, clean job with a real good mentor who kind of was like, clean as you go. Here's a way to get out, you know, like clean, clean, and then leave. So they can't find you when they're looking for something else.
Well, let me just go make a Is it a shift? I know it's 6 a.m., 6
Yeah. 12 on, 12 off.
I mean, it's running 24 hours, the ship, right?
Yeah. And at that time, we were feeding somewhere 24 hours a day.
Well, did they eat on shifts? Are you cooking? In other words, you're cooking one breakfast at 6 and one at 10?
Yeah, well, you know, breakfast, so there was a forward galley and a rear galley. The rear galley is the biggest.
Okay. Now, this is enlisted or both?
Enlisted, but there's also, so we're in S2, which was enlisted for enlisted men.
Okay.
And then there was another group who cooked for the officers.
So the officers had their own mess.
Had their own, and chiefs had their own mess.
Oh, chief warrant officers.
So yeah, so chief officers,
they didn't eat with the regular officers. They
No, they had their own.
That was different in the Army. In the Army, warrant and warrant was an officer.
No, on board Nimitz, it was enlisted, 2 galleys for enlisted, 1 for chief's mess, and then officers had like 2 or 3 smaller dining.
Now, the reputation I always heard, tell me if I'm right or wrong, from my viewpoint, the Navy and the Air Force had the best food. What do you think?
Yeah, well, we certainly ate well. I don't know about the rest of the crew, but we had good food. Yeah, you know, it was good. Now, my very first cruise that I went on, which was May of 1980.
So it's the first time you leave
First time I leave Norfolk, first time we leave the pier. We're doing a Gitmo cruise, which is a shakedown cruise, you know, preparing for a bigger cruise. Right. We had a crash on the flight deck. Now 14 crashed on the flight deck. 14 guys were killed. 48 injured. 20.
This was a major event.
Major event. 20 airplanes were destroyed.
So someone just landed.
Yeah, my understanding is that the pilot. I'm not certain about this, but my understanding is the pilot attempted one landing. Second one crashed into a series of planes that were refueling.
Kind of out of control.
So things went bad. There were missiles exploding. There were.
Now, could you hear all this happening above you? Or what?
Yeah, you know, we were cooks. Typically, not a lot of us had battle stations.
Okay.
I'd say maybe a quarter of us or a third of us had battle stations.
Explain for the audience. you're cooking, that's your main job. But if a certain battle station, so what would you
Certain
do?
groups certain guys would go to man hoses or whatever, make sure.
You had some type of job.
Yeah, they had some type of safety job.
okay.
Whereas most of us were, so ships are maintain airtight integrity.
Right.
So you're in compartments. They close the hatches off.
So everything's shut off.
Everything's shut in. So you're shut in a hatch. We did have closed circuit TV, so we could see a little bit of what was going on. But every half an hour or so, these guys would come down in full disaster gear, gas
You are a
mask.
nuclear powered craft.
Yeah, and they would come down and check them. We had jet fuel running through our berthing.
Yes,
So they would come down to make sure there weren't any leaks. But it weirded us out because we were sitting there with like World War II gas mask hanging off our head.
Hey guys,
and these guys are in complete gear. And we're like, wait a minute. They'd come down and and then go back up. And we're like, we're sitting ducks here, right?
Now, was it, I mean, this is a major event.
Major
is the
event.
whole ship locked down and into like DEFCON,
Yeah, it's a big deal. You have nuclear reactors on board.
I mean, if a fire,
Fire on the flight deck. Typically I think it's about 60 or 65 planes on board. So a third of the planes were destroyed, wiped out. When it was over.
Integrity to the ship damage too? I mean.
Yeah, there was some, not much, I don't think, but there are pictures out there of us coming back to Norfolk after the fire that night. So it started like 10 or 11 o'clock, went through to the morning.
Oh, burned all the way through the morning?
Yeah, by the time the firefighting was done, and then they let us out to go up to the galleys and start cooking for everyone. And we made the mistake of passing through the hangar bay where some of the bodies were. And it kind of, for an 18-year-old kid from Queen Anne's County, it was like, oh, this is for real. And it was my first cruise.
Oh, this is your
very first time ever out to sea. And then
welcome to the Navy.
Yeah, and we came home. We steamed into Norfolk. We unloaded. This was before cell phones and the internet.
So
no one knew. There was a phone 1-800 number our families could call to make sure that we weren't. Yeah. And Mom ran into somebody at the local Acme, and they said, well, I wouldn't worry about Brent too much. He's a cook. He was probably down. And Mom was like, yeah, but he's always where he's not supposed to be. You can't. Yeah, but she was more like, you can't trust him to be where he's supposed to be.
Could you smell the smoke and smell the
fuel? And sound, noise. Okay. I mean, it was, and things would explode and you'd feel the shake, even on that ship, which we were, I think the cook's berthing was like 3 or 4 decks below.
Well, that's good, I mean, let's leave that disaster.
Yeah.
Army, we lived in, imagine a gymnasium, bunks, 20 of us, 30 of us. How was the berthing? I mean, how was it?
The first time I get to the ship, in fact, the first day that we get to the ship, I'm walking by the front galley. All units on the ship had to temporarily send people to work in the galley.
Okay.
Even though they weren't cooks.
Right.
But I was walking past the galley and somebody said, Brent Lewis. And I turned around and it was a kid I graduated from high school with, Homer Dozier.
You're kidding me.
From Crumpton.
Oh, wow.
Boomy, we called him. And I was like, oh my God, there's someone I know. And they lead us down into the berthing. We walk down.
He'd been in longer than you. He had more rank.
Yeah, a few months, and he was doing his temporary duty there, and in the kitchen. And then I walk down to the berthing, and there's 40 or 60 racks, bunks,
40 to 60.
Stacked 3 high.
Now, this is just 1, 2, 3. I mean,
literally,
like, just like TV. You see,
3, 6, so 12 in a square, 3 up, 3 down. And I walk down the berthing, and this guy's, and we're all boot camp, so we have our hair cut, and but I walk down, and this guy who had been on the Gonzo cruise, the Iranian thing, he jumps out of his rack, and he's got an afro that like goes straight up like Kid and Play. And I was like, oh, we're in a different situation now than boot camp.
You're in the real world.
We're in the real Navy now. And those guys who had been on Gonzo cruise, I don't want to say they were crazy, but a lot of those guys were crazy.
Well, how long are you out to sea,
Yeah, they've been out to sea for 100
Brent, let me ask you, in the Army, even in Vietnam, we pulled a 12-hour shift, but then there were movies. Then there was usually a recreation room.
Yeah.
Then there were donut dollies we'd visit. I mean, you're in a ship, what are you doing?
Well, we were kind of pampered as cooks. So, like,
okay.
if you've been out to sea for a long time, there'll be water restrictions. But cooks are always allowed to shower.
Really? Well, you have to.
Yeah, right. You have to be clean, right? So, and then we'd make food for ourselves and take it down to the berthing. There were always movies on TV. Guys played cards.
So you actually had a TV in your area.
Closed circuit in the lounge in the berthing area. So, and they ran movies 24/7.
Now,
And
just because I'm so naive, but I mean, what are we talking about? We talking, you know, how low? Can you go all the way down to the bottom of the ship and then walk all? Can you go to a PX or a movie?
yeah, I mean, there's PXs and there's you know, barbershops and
So they're different
there's
places.
stuff to do. Yeah, gyms. There's a gym.
Actually, gym and
you
stuff.
know.
I mean, could you walk just about anywhere? Obviously, not the nuclear, but could you walk just about anywhere?
You know, that's another thing about having been a cook. We had access to places that we weren't supposed to go.
You had to deliver food.
Because guys would be like, "Hey, man, like, I'll trade you this for that. Meet me down.
Give me a cheese sandwich and a glass of milk."
Well, and so my med cruise, my first med cruise, which is, let me think, November '81 to like May '82. I worked in the overnight bake shop.
Oh, wow.
So we, you know,
You
every night we
specialize in
made
baking stuff.
Yes, we made pies and cakes and jello and pudding, but we also had yeast. And so we were always getting knocks on the doors, guys trying to get yeast from us to make stuff, you know. But also we were giving a lot of stuff out the back door, so we would have to make extra every night. But it got us into the photo lab. It got us into.
You're training. You're
Yeah.
training. Welcome to this.
We didn't wait in lines.
Our favorite thing in the Army, and what you're describing now, I was in supply for a while. We used to go to the officers' mess, which was completely separate. They had better quality meat, better quality meat. You'd walk in the back door, in the actual kitchen. Hey guys, you need some new boots. You need some new clothes. Guess what? All of a sudden, you would sit down at a table. You'd have French toast. You'd have scrambled egg.
Yeah.
And this is what you're kind of describing.
Right? Like we'd always make deals, and so therefore, like I've been down into the bowels of the ship. Like guys we knew would say, "Come down and see, check us out," and those guys were like hermits. Like they'd been in, they had beards, you know. But then, so on that first med cruise. So we've already experienced the crash on the flight deck.
Yeah.
Welcome. And we go back to Norfolk. Then we leave in November, I think, for my first med cruise. But while we're out,
were you scared? I mean, it sounds silly. Only a couple times in the Army was I scared because it was completely, what was happening was completely out of my control.
Yeah.
Were you scared?
No, I don't think I ever felt.
You were too busy.
Scared. They keep you busy, but it did seem like, you know, we were on a ship that a lot of stuff happened to.
We got planes landing.
Well, and then, you know, on that first cruise, 2 of our pilots shot down the Libyan jets.
You kidding me?
Gaddafi's jets in the Gulf of Sidra.
This is a hot spot.
And so that was a major event, Gulf of Sidra, the line of death, all that stuff. And then that same cruise, we were in Venice when Anwar Sadat got assassinated, so it was total recall back to the ship, and we go back out to
this is
the
America's premier defensive weapon.
So that first year,
I hope they gave you a lot of promotion.
it was a lot going on. It was like every time we went to sea, something
Now, Brent, I'm going to have to
happened.
apologize. Our time. I know the scariest thing about doing TV, as you know. Time
is of the essence.
We'll get you in the future to come back.
Sure.
Let me just kind of, in the minute we have left, would you say, as you talk to young people and talk to people, military, a positive experience for you?
Yes, I learned a lot about myself.
Good.
I went places that I never would have gone before, you know, Egypt, Israel, Greece, Spain.
What was the last 30 seconds? What was the best and most great, if you could say to the audience, look, go to the Navy just to go, what was the best place you went?
Oh,
probably Italy or something.
Yeah, you know, there were highlights in all of it.
Oh, so it was good.
Egypt was cool. You know, the pyramids and the Sphinx.
Okay.
And we got stuck there for a few days because of weather, so we couldn't take the Liberty boats back. and so I had an extended stay in Egypt.
You sacrifice yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing I would say would be I met people who will always be my friends, whether I ever see them again or not.
Lifelong.
And I've got a couple. I had 3. One passed away, but I have some guys that we talk regularly. We visit each other regularly. Okay. We're friends.
So it was a good positive thing.
Yes, it was a good positive thing.
Brent, I do apologize for the...
No, man, I'm happy.
Thank you for your service. Thank you for your good stories. I want everyone to go out and buy Brent Lewis's books, okay? Our time is up, and I apologize.
Well, thank you for all you do, in the community,
thank you.
but also for vets.
We have fun. You
guys do a lot of good things, and it's appreciated.
It's a good group to work with. My name's Fred McNeil. Thank you for watching QATV 7. My time's up. Thank you for your time. We're going to see you next time. And to all the veterans, men and women out there, thank you very much. And don't eat anything Brent cooked.